Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became the next Captain America. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. Not the sterile, empty silence between programs, but a heavy, reverent hush that seemed to seep from the television screens and fill living rooms, offices, and public squares across the globe. Then came the image. The Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, its surface like polished obsidian under a somber gray sky. At its edge stood a newer monument, a simple bronze statue of a man in tactical gear, shield held not in aggression, but protectively over his heart. The inscription at its base read, Stephen G. Rogers, a good man. A newswoman's voice, somber and familiar, finally broke the quiet. It has been 5 years. 5 years since the world lost its sentinel of liberty, Captain America. In a world now defined by the extraordinary, by the godlike powers of quirks, he was a testament to something more fundamental, the peak of human potential, guided by an unbreakable moral compass. He was a symbol not of what power we are born with, but what we choose to do with the power we have. The montage that followed was a cornerstone of modern history. Black and white footage of a scrawny kid from Brooklyn, grainy color film of him leading soldiers through mud and fire, and finally, crisp high-definition video from his later years, standing shoulder to shoulder with the first generation of pro-heroes. He was a bridge between two worlds, the world before quirks, and the one after. He had been there when the first glowing baby was born, a steadying hand in an age of fear and uncertainty. He had worked with the fledgling hero commissions, helping to write the very rulebooks that govern modern heroics. His last public act was shielding a crowd of civilians in Tokyo from a collapsing skyscraper, his vibranium shield the only thing between them and oblivion. He had saved them all, but the strain had finally proven too much for a body nearly a century old. The broadcast cut to a live press conference. The flags of Japan and the United States of America stood side by side on a stark, imposing stage. Before the podium stood two figures, General Marcus Cole of the U.S. Special Missions Command, a man whose jaw looked like it was carved from granite, and Kane Tsutsumi, the formidable president of the Hero Public Safety Commission of Japan. General Cole spoke first, his voice a low baritone that commanded attention. Steve Rogers believed in a simple idea, that one person, the right person, could inspire the world. He was living proof. In the 5 years since his passing, we have seen a rise in coordinated villainous activity, a fracturing of international cooperation, and a growing sense of fear. The symbols we have are powerful, but they are national. The world needs a unifying symbol again. Not a weapon. Not a soldier. A shield. President Tsutsumi stepped forward, her gaze sweeping across the sea of reporters. For this reason, our two nations have embarked on an unprecedented joint initiative. A project that honors Captain Rogers' legacy by seeking not to replicate the man, but to find a successor worthy of his ideals. Today, we officially announce the launch of Project Rebirth. A murmur rippled through the press corps, quickly escalating into a cacophony of questions. Tsutsumi raised a hand, and silence fell once more. Project Rebirth will identify a single candidate to receive a perfected, stable version of the super soldier serum that created the original Captain America, she stated, her words precise and heavy with implication. This individual will be chosen not for the strength of their quirk, or for their raw power, but for their character, their strategic acumen, and their unwavering dedication to protecting others. They will be trained by the best of our nations. They will carry the shield. They will become a new symbol of hope for a global community. The search has already begun. In a state-of-the-art training facility tucked away in the remote mountains of Hokkaido, the search was indeed well underway. This was the Aegis facility, a place where concrete and advanced composites met traditional Japanese architecture, creating an environment that was both a fortress and a monastery. Inside a vast, domed simulation chamber, the air crackled with power. Candidate 7 Katsuki Bakugo. Quirk, explosion. Threat level, dragon. Begin simulation. The metallic voice echoed as a dozen advanced combat drones whirred to life, their optical sensors glowing a malevolent red. In the center of the arena stood Katsuki Bakugo. He wasn't wearing a school uniform, but black tactical gear that did nothing to hide the powerful musculature of his arms and shoulders. A cocky, predatory grin was plastered on his face. "Is that all you got for me?" he snarled, his palms already beginning to smoke. The drones attacked in a synchronized swarm. Laser fire stitched the air. Concussive blasts shook the floor. For any other candidate, it would have been an overwhelming onslaught. For Bakugo, it was a playground. He moved like a natural disaster. An explosive leap carried him over the initial volley, his hands aimed downwards. AP shot, a concentrated blast, like a armor-piercing round, punched through the lead drone, turning it into a shower of shrapnel. He landed, spun, and unleashed a wider, more powerful explosion from his left hand, sending 3 more drones tumbling through the air like discarded toys. He didn't just use his quirk for offense. A small, controlled blast at his feet propelled him sideways, dodging an incoming plasma bolt. He used another to change direction mid-air, a human pinball of terrifying destructive force. He was brutal, efficient, and devastatingly powerful. His combat instincts were second to none, each movement flowing into the next with practiced, violent grace. In an observation room high above, a panel of stern-faced officials watched on multiple monitors. On one screen, Bakugo's biometrics were displayed, heart rate elevated but steady, adrenaline output optimal. On another, a power-scaling metric was fluctuating wildly, pushing into the red. His power output is unprecedented, a man in a U.S. military uniform noted impressed. He's a one-man army. His psychological profile is aggressive, countered a Japanese woman from the HPSC. He shows a distinct lack of concern for collateral damage, even in a simulation. He's a weapon, the general grunted. And we need someone who can win. Look at that. Pure instinct. Bakugo had cornered the final 3 drones. Instead of picking them off, he cupped his hands together, a wicked glee in his eyes. Howitzer impact. The resulting explosion was blinding. A storm of heat and light filled the chamber, the shockwave rattling the reinforced glass of the observation deck. When the glare faded, the drones were nothing more than molten slag dripping onto the floor. Bakugo stood in the center of the devastation, chest heaving, a triumphant, almost manic grin on his face. "He's the one," General Cole said, a note of finality in his voice. "Who could possibly be better?" Miles away, in a cramped apartment in Mizudafu, the broadcast played on a small, flickering television. The room was a shrine to heroism. All Might posters covered every inch of wall space, his signature V for Victory smile a beacon of primary-colored optimism. But mixed in with the Japanese heroes were older, rarer pieces of memorabilia. A faded comic book cover depicting Captain America punching Hitler. A small, plastic replica of the Star-Spangled Shield, worn and chipped from years of being handled. And on a cluttered desk, dozens of notebooks. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. The notebook was open to a fresh page. At the top, in neat, precise handwriting, was the title, Captain America, Rogers, S. Quirkless Heroism Applied Physics. Below it were detailed sketches of the shield, with lines and equations calculating ricochet angles, kinetic energy absorption, and potential applications of its unique properties. Izuku Midoriya chewed on the end of his pen, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and scholarly focus as he listened to President Tsutsumi words. A successor, they're choosing a successor. His heart hammered against his ribs. It was the most amazing, terrifying, wonderful idea he had ever heard. A new Captain America. Someone to carry on that legacy. A familiar pang of despair followed the initial excitement. He looked down at his own hands, plain and powerless. He was quirkless. A genetic dead end in an evolved world. The kids at school never let him forget it. Deku, they called him. Useless. He slammed the notebook shut, the sound sharp in the quiet room. It doesn't matter, Izuku. You can't be a hero. The words of his doctor, his classmates, even his own mother's apologetic tears, echoed in his mind. He couldn't be a pro-hero like All Might. And he certainly couldn't be a super soldier like Captain America. All he could do was watch, and analyze, and dream. Grabbing his yellow backpack, he headed out, the faint scent of his mother's katsudan doing little to lift his spirits. He needed to clear his head. His usual route took him past the Tacoba Municipal Beach Park, a place he often went to think. As he rounded a corner, the familiar sounds of chaos reached him, sirens shouting, the low thrum of a powerful quirk. His feet moved before his brain caught up. It was a compulsion. He had to see. He had to analyze. He skidded to a halt at the edge of a police barricade, peering through the crowd. It was a tense standoff. A villain, a large, brutish man with greasy hair and panicked eyes, was holding a family of 3 hostage in the middle of a small plaza. The mother and father were frozen in fear, their young daughter sobbing quietly. Glowing, ethereal strands of light connected the villain to each of the hostages, originating from his fingertips. Nobody move! The villain, who the news was already calling Silas, screamed. One step closer and I tighten the tethers. Their hearts stop when I say so. Izuku's mind immediately kicked into overdrive, his earlier melancholy forgotten and replaced by a rapid-fire stream of analytical thought. Quirk, tether, looks like an energy construct, possibly psionic or bioelectric. Controls the autonomic functions of those he's connected to. Range appears to be about 15 meters. Requires line of sight? No, the father is behind the mother, but he's still tethered. Requires concentration. Look at his eyes, they're unfocused, strained. He's splitting his focus between 3 people. That's his weakness. The pro-heroes on the scene were struggling. The fiery hero Backdraft couldn't use his flames without risking injury to the hostages. The winged hero Steel Plume couldn't get close enough for a physical takedown. They were at an impasse, their powerful quirks rendered useless by the delicate situation. We need a long-range nullifier, Steel Plume muttered into his comms, just loud enough for Izuku's sharp ears to catch. Eraserhead is 20 minutes out. 20 minutes is too long, Izuku thought, his knuckles white as he gripped his backpack strap. The villain is getting more agitated. His control could slip. He could panic and... He couldn't finish the thought. His eyes darted around the scene, not at the heroes, not at the villain, but at the environment. The plaza. The props. The angles. The sun is setting behind that building, he murmured under his breath, a habit he could never break. Creates a glare on the west side of the plaza. The villain is facing east to watch the heroes. His back is to the glare. There's a loose fire hydrant cap on the pavement to his left. A discarded, empty aluminum can near the curb to his right. A large plate glass window on the storefront behind him. The pieces clicked into place in his mind, forming a chain of events, a sequence of precise, calculated actions. It was insane. It was reckless. It was the only thing he could think of that might work. It required perfect timing and a complete disregard for his own safety. He didn't think about the danger. He thought about the crying little girl. He thought about All Might's unwavering smile. He thought about the statue of a good man who always ran toward the fire. Before the rational part of his brain could scream at him to stop, Izuku ducked under the police tape. Hey! Kid! Get back here! A police officer yelled, but Izuku was already moving. He sprinted, not towards the villain, but in a wide arc along the edge of the plaza. He scooped up the empty aluminum can without breaking stride. His movements were clumsy, not like Bakugo's explosive grace, but they were fueled by a desperate, terrifying purpose. What the? Another hero? Silas, the villain, yelled, his head snapping towards the commotion. His concentration wavered for a split second. Izuku saw it. That was the opening. He wasn't strong, but he knew physics. He hurled the can not at Silas, but at the loose fire hydrant cap on the ground. The clang of metal on metal was sharp and loud, drawing Silas's eyes downward for a critical half-second. In that half-second, Izuku had already grabbed a shard of a broken mirror from a pile of trash. He angled it perfectly. The setting sun, which had been a passive element of the scene, became his weapon. He caught the light and flashed it directly into Silas's eyes. Arg! The villain flinched back, momentarily blinded, his hands flying up to his face. The glowing tethers flickered. That was all the opening the heroes needed. Steel Plume moved like a bullet. In the instant Silas was blinded and distracted, the winged hero covered the distance, his movements a blur. A single, precise chop to the back of the villain's neck, and Silas crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The tethers dissolved into nothing. The plaza was silent for a moment, then erupted in cheers as officers rushed in to secure the villain and paramedics attended to the shaken but unharmed family. Izuku stood frozen, his heart trying to beat its way out of his chest. He was trembling from the adrenaline. He had done it. It had worked. "Are you out of your mind, kid?" The furious voice of Backdraft snapped him back to reality. The fiery hero stomped over to him, his face a mask of rage. "You could have been killed. You could have gotten those people killed. What were you thinking, running into an active villain situation? You're quirkless, for crying out loud. This isn't a game." Izuku flinched back, shame and fear flooding him. The hero was right. It was reckless. It was stupid. He was just a useless Deku who got in the way. "I'm sorry," he stammered, his eyes on the pavement. "I just saw an opening." "An opening? You saw a chance to get yourself splattered all over the news." "That's enough, Backdraft." The voice was female, calm, and utterly authoritative. It cut through the hero's tirade like a scalpel. Izuku looked up. Standing just behind the fuming hero was a woman. She was tall, with sharp, intelligent features, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a tailored black suit that looked more military than corporate, and her piercing blue eyes were fixed on Izuku, analyzing him with an unnerving intensity. Beside her was a man so tall and skeletal he looked like a walking scarecrow. His blonde hair fell in two long, shaggy bangs around a gaunt, shadowed face. His clothes, a simple white shirt and green cargo pants, seemed far too big for his emaciated frame. But it was his eyes that held Izuku captive. They were sunken in dark sockets, yet they burned with a startling blue fire, an intensity that seemed to look right through Izuku's skin and into his very soul. His actions were not reckless, the woman said, her gaze unwavering. They were calculated. He identified the villain's cognitive overload. He utilized environmental factors, light, sound, and reflection, to create a cascading sensory overload, intentionally breaking the concentration required to maintain his quirk. It was a tactically brilliant, non-lethal solution to a problem two pro-heroes were unable to solve with their quirks. "Is that an accurate assessment, young man?" Izuku stared, dumbfounded. She had just perfectly articulated the frantic, half-formed plan that had exploded in his brain. He could only nod, his throat suddenly dry. The tall, skeletal man took a slow step forward, his shadow falling over Izuku. He coughed, a dry, rattling sound that seemed to shake his entire frame. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly gentle, yet carried an immense weight. "Why did you do it, son?" he asked. "You knew the danger. You have no quirk to protect yourself. Why did you run in?" Izuku looked from the man's burning eyes to the family being led away by paramedics. The little girl looked back over her mother's shoulder, her tear-streaked face now filled with relief. She saw Izuku and gave him a small, hesitant wave. The answer came out before he could stop it, raw and honest. "Because, their faces," he whispered, his own eyes welling up. "They looked like they needed help." It was the simplest, purest answer. It was the only answer that mattered. The skeletal man's expression softened. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He exchanged a look with the woman beside him, a silent communication that passed between them in an instant. The woman gave a single, sharp nod. "Izuku Midoriya," she said, and Izuku flinched at the sound of his name. How did she know his name? "My name is Dr. Aris Thorn. This is my associate, Mr. Yagi." How do you?" Izuku started. "We have been observing potential candidates for a very important project for some time," Dr. Thorn cut him off smoothly. "Candidates with unique skill sets. We saw your academic records. Top of your class. Your analytical abilities are off the charts. But data can only tell you so much." Mr. Yagi, All Might in his hidden form, spoke again, his voice resonating with a deep sincerity that made Izuku's hair stand on end. "A hero's true measure isn't in their power. It's in their heart. It's in the moment they choose to act, not because they know they can win, but because they know they have to try. You just showed us more in 30 seconds than most pro-heroes show in a lifetime." Izuku's head was spinning. Candidates? A project? What were they talking about? Dr. Thorne stepped closer, her expression serious, her voice dropping to a near whisper. The world needs a new symbol, Mr. Midoriya. It needs someone who embodies the courage you just displayed. Not the courage of invulnerability, but the courage of profound selflessness. She held out a simple black business card. It had no name, no number, just an address and a single, embossed symbol, a star encircled by an eagle's wings. What we are offering is not a job as a pro-hero, she said, her eyes boring into his. It is not about fame or fortune. It is a chance to be part of something bigger than any one person, any one quirk. The skeletal man, Mr. Yagi, placed a surprisingly heavy hand on Izuku's shoulder. The touch was grounding, a point of stability in a world that had just been turned upside down. We believe a hero's spirit is not something you are born with, he said, his voice imbued with a quiet, unshakable conviction. It's something you choose to be, every single day. He looked Izuku directly in the eye, and for a fleeting moment, Izuku saw not a sick, skeletal man, but the shadow of a giant, a pillar of hope. The question is, Izuku Midoriya, Mr. Yagi finished, his voice echoing the sentiment of the broadcast that had captivated the world only hours earlier. Do you have what it takes to be a good man? The car was a ghost. It moved through the neon-drenched streets of Mizurufu with a silence that was unnatural, its black-on-black design absorbing the city lights rather than reflecting them. For Izuku Midoriya, the entire experience felt like a kidnapping orchestrated by angels. He sat in the plush leather back seat, clutching the simple black business card Dr. Thorne had given him as if it were a holy relic. His mind was a maelstrom of confusion, terror, and a fragile, terrifying flicker of hope. My mother! He had stammered, his first coherent thought after they'd guided him away from the scene. I have to, she'll worry. Dr. Thorne, seated opposite him, hadn't even looked up from her tablet. A cover story has already been established, Mr. Midoriya. Your school has been informed that you've been accepted into a highly prestigious, all-expenses-paid international STEM research program, sponsored by a subsidiary of Stark Industries. Your mother received the call an hour ago. She is, I believe the term is, over the moon. It was so efficient, so total, that it left Izuku breathless. His entire life, rerouted in the span of a single evening. Mr. Yagi sat beside him, silent as the car itself, his skeletal frame taking up a surprising amount of space. He occasionally coughed, a dry, racking sound, but his gaze remained fixed on the passing city, his expression unreadable. They drove for hours, leaving the urban sprawl for winding mountain roads. The cityscape gave way to ancient forests of cedar and pine, their dark forms silhouetted against the sky ablaze with stars. Finally, they passed through a security checkpoint so discreet Izuku hadn't even seen it until they were upon it. A massive gate, disguised as a sheer rock face, slid silently open, revealing a tunnel lit with soft, recessed lighting. When they emerged, Izuku's jaw dropped. Nestled in a hidden caldera, shielded from the world by a ring of volcanic mountains, was the Aegis facility. It was a breathtaking fusion of disparate worlds. Sleek, minimalist structures of dark steel and shimmering glass were seamlessly integrated with traditional Japanese architecture, curved tile roofs, sliding shoji screen walls, and meticulously raked gravel gardens. It was a place built for both contemplation and cutting-edge conflict. Dr. Thorne led him through a set of imposing doors into a vast, central atrium. The air was cool and smelled of ozone and polished steel. Around the perimeter, other young men and women milled about, all clad in identical gray and black training fatigues. They were a gallery of genetic lottery winners. A boy with arms made of what looked like solid granite was arm wrestling another whose skin shimmered with a metallic sheen. A girl with hair like pink fire nonchalantly juggled orbs of crackling energy. They were powerful, confident, and radiated an aura of effortless superiority. Izuku felt himself shrink, his worn All Might t-shirt and jeans suddenly feeling like a pauper's rags. He was a sparrow that had accidentally stumbled into an eyrie of eagles. Then, he saw him. Leaning against a far wall, arms crossed, was Katsuki Bakugo. The sight hit Izuku like a physical blow. Of course Bakugo was here. Of course the pinnacle of power, talent, and heroic potential would be a candidate for a project like this. Bakugo's crimson eyes scanned the room with bored arrogance until they landed on Izuku. For a moment, there was nothing but pure, unadulterated confusion on Bakugo's face. It was the expression of a supercomputer encountering a logical paradox. Then, the confusion curdled into disbelief, which swiftly ignited into a familiar, volcanic rage. He pushed off the wall and stomped across the atrium, his steps heavy with indignation. The other candidates instinctively parted for him. "Deku?" he snarled, the name a venomous hiss. He stopped directly in front of Izuku, jabbing a thumb at his own chest, then at Izuku's. "What in the ever-loving hell are you doing here? Did you get the janitor job? Did you follow me here to lick the damn floors?" Izuku flinched, instinctively taking a step back. "Kaken. They invited me." Bakugo stared at him, then threw his head back and let out a bark of derisive laughter. "They invited you? A quirkless, useless Deku? For what? To be the official before picture? This has to be a joke, some kind of sick joke." His eyes narrowed to slits. "Don't get in my way, you pebble. This is my stage. I'm the one they're looking for. I'm the next Captain America. Now get lost before you trip and break something." He shoved past Izuku, a deliberate, contemptuous shoulder check that sent Izuku stumbling. Izuku caught his balance, his face burning with a shame so hot it felt like it could melt his bones. He knew he didn't belong here. Now everyone else did, too. The next 2 weeks were a blur of systematic humiliation. The proving grounds of Project Rebirth were designed to test the absolute limits of human and metahuman capability, and Izuku's limits were found, and surpassed, almost immediately. The first test was the Path of the Titan, a grueling obstacle course that wound through the facility's very terrain. Bakugo went first. He didn't run the course, he waged war on it. He used his explosions to blast over high walls, propel himself across wide chasms, and obliterate drone targets with contemptuous ease. He finished in a record-shattering 4 minutes and 12 seconds, leaving a trail of smoke and smoldering craters in his wake. When it was Izuku's turn, he felt the weight of every condescending stare. He couldn't blast over the 20-foot wall. He had to climb it, hand over agonizing hand, his muscles screaming. He fell twice. He couldn't propel himself over the chasm. He had to use the rope swing, his timing off, sending him slamming into the far cliff face with a painful thud. He finished, but his time was a pathetic 27 minutes and 46 seconds. He collapsed at the finish line, lungs on fire, his body a symphony of aches. In the observation deck above, General Cole pointed at Bakugo's time on the main screen. "There. See? That's a warrior. Instinct. Power. Efficiency." He gestured dismissively at the monitor showing a replay of Izuku clinging desperately to the wall. "That's tenacity. Admirable, but useless on a battlefield." Dr. Thorne watched the same replay, her expression clinical. "He fell twice. He got back up 3 times. Note his grip adjustment on the 3rd attempt. He learned from his failure in real time. That's data processing under extreme duress." Mr. Yagi, or All Might as he was in Izuku's mind, remained silent, his gaze fixed on the small, trembling figure of Izuku. He saw the pain, the exhaustion, but he also saw the unyielding fire in the boy's eyes. It was a look he knew all too well. The combat sparring was even worse. Izuku was pitted against a broad-shouldered candidate with a minor hardening quirk. It wasn't a fight. It was a physics demonstration of an unstoppable force meeting a very movable object. Izuku was thrown, flipped, and pinned in under 30 seconds. He got up, insisted on a rematch, and was put down again in 20. Each time, Bakugo's jeering laughter was the soundtrack to his failure. "Why is he even still here?" Cole demanded in the observation room. "He's a liability. Every test confirms it." "Not every test," Dr. Thorne said coolly, keying a command into her console. "Begin simulation for Delta." This was where the tide turned. The candidates were placed one by one into a full-immersion Neuralink simulator. The scenario: a high-stakes hostage crisis. 12 civilians, including 2 children, were trapped on the top floor of a chemical plant. 3 heavily armed villains had rigged the primary processing tanks to blow. Their demands were non-negotiable. Bakugo entered the simulation with his signature bravado. His solution was brutally direct. He used a controlled explosion to breach a wall away from the hostages, drew the villains' fire, and then systematically neutralized them with overwhelming force. He rescued all 12 hostages. His time was an astonishing 1 minute and 58 seconds. Flawless, Cole declared, clapping his hands together. A perfect run. Look at the collateral damage report, Dr. Thorne said, her voice dry. A new screen lit up. Red bars indicated a 78% probability of a catastrophic secondary explosion from a ruptured coolant line Bakugo had ignored. The structural integrity of the building was compromised by 43%. He saved the hostages, General, but he risked leveling 3 city blocks to do it. He saw the objective, not the environment. Now let's see Midoriya's run. Izuku sat in the simulator chair, his eyes closed. When the scenario began, he didn't move. For a full minute, he just stood in the virtual world, his eyes darting everywhere. He wasn't looking at the villains or the hostages. He was looking at air vents, at pressure gauges on pipes, at the schematics for the building's fire suppression system displayed on a nearby monitor. His solution was nothing short of breathtaking. He didn't engage the villains directly. Instead, he hacked a maintenance terminal and rerouted the plant's ventilation system, slowly pumping a harmless but potent soporific gas, stolen from a medical bay 2 floors down, into the sealed-off top floor. While the villains grew drowsy and confused, he used a fire alarm on a different floor as a distraction. As their attention was diverted, he spoke to the lead hostage, a trained off-duty security guard, a detail Bakugo had completely missed in his briefing, through a janitor's radio he'd found, calmly instructing him on how to disarm the primary trigger when the moment was right. When the villains finally collapsed from the gas, the hostage had already disabled the bomb. Izuku entered the room without a single shot fired, a single punch thrown. Total time, 12 minutes and 7 seconds. Collateral damage, 0. Risk to hostages, eliminated. In the observation room, there was a stunned silence. General Cole stared at the screen, his mouth slightly agape. He weaponized the ventilation system, he said, baffled. He weaponized information, Dr. Thorne corrected. He saw the entire board, not just the enemy king. He showed patience, intellect, and a fundamental dedication to the preservation of life above all else. That, General, is something you cannot teach. All Might allowed a small, proud smile to grace his lips. This was the boy he had seen, the one who analyzed situations in a heartbeat. The seed of hope in his chest began to sprout. The day of the final assessment arrived. The remaining 20 candidates were gathered in a large, sterile white staging area. The mood was thick with tension. They were all exhausted, pushed to their absolute limits. Izuku stood off to the side, trying to make himself as small as possible, acutely aware of Bakugo's burning glare from across the room. Dr. Thorne, General Cole, and Mr. Yagi entered, standing before them on a raised platform. Candidates, Dr. Thorne began, her voice echoing in the chamber. You have all shown remarkable capabilities. But power and skill are only part of the equation. We are here today for one final assessment, a test not of your strength, or your speed, or your quirk, but of you. General Cole looked smug, his eyes fixed on Bakugo, who puffed out his chest in anticipation. This had to be it. The final showdown. The test that would prove, once and for all, who the real hero was. A technician wheeled in a single training dummy, positioning it in the center of the room. It was a standard, faceless humanoid model used for target practice. This is a simple observation test, Dr. Thorne said. Pay attention. The dummy stood inert for a long, quiet moment. Then, a low whirring sound started in its chest cavity. It grew louder, escalating to a high-pitched screech. A panel on its chest popped open, and a small, sleek, cylindrical device shot out, arcing through the air. It landed on the polished floor with a metallic clatter and skidded to a stop in the very center of the group of candidates. A single, brilliant red light on its surface began to blink, the accompanying beeps growing faster and faster. Beep. Beep. Beep 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 beep. Panic erupted. Years of training, instinct, and self-preservation kicked in. 2 candidates with shield-like quirks immediately protected themselves. The girl with the fiery hair tried to incinerate the device, but her hands were trembling too much to aim. Most of the others simply dove for cover, scrambling away with shouts of terror. Bakugo reacted with pure, aggressive instinct. Idiots! Move! He roared, his palms already sparking. His plan was clear: detonate it on his own terms, contain the blast with a shaped charge, and prove he was the only one with the power and guts to handle a real threat. He was saving everyone by being the strongest. He was saving himself. But Izuku didn't see a threat to be destroyed. He saw people who needed to be protected. His mind didn't have time for analysis. There were no schematics to read, no angles to calculate. There was only the blinking red light and the terrified faces of the people around him. He thought of the family in the plaza. He thought of the image of Captain America's statue, shield held over the heart. His body moved on its own. There was no hesitation. No flicker of doubt. It was a pure, unthinking, sacrificial impulse. He launched himself forward, covering the 10 feet in a desperate, clumsy sprint. He didn't try to throw it. He didn't try to disarm it. He dove, wrapping his skinny, corkless body around the device, pressing it into the floor and curling over it like a mother bird shielding her nest. He squeezed his eyes shut, his teeth gritted, ready for the fire and the pain and the end. "Get back!" he screamed, his voice muffled by the floor. "Everyone, get away!" The beeping stopped. The red light went out. Silence. A profound, deafening silence filled the room. The only sound was Izuku's own ragged, terrified breathing. He lay there for a second, then 2, then 5. Nothing happened. He was still, whole. Slowly, shakily, he pushed himself up. The device was inert. A dummy. The other candidates were staring at him, their faces a mixture of shock, confusion, and a dawning, uncomfortable shame. Bakugo stood frozen, his hands still sparking, his face a mask of utter disbelief. His mind, so brilliant at combat and strategy, could not compute what it had just witnessed. Why? Why would anyone do that? Why would Deku, the most worthless, powerless person he knew, throw his life away for a bunch of extras he didn't even know? It was an act so fundamentally alien to Bakugo's entire worldview that it had short-circuited his brain. Footsteps echoed on the pristine floor. Dr. Thorne walked calmly from the platform, stopping just before the trembling Izuku. She looked down at him, then swept her gaze across the other candidates, before finally landing on General Cole, whose face was pale. "The super soldier serum was developed by a man named Abraham Erskine," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the thick tension. "He believed the serum amplified everything that is inside a person. So, good becomes great. Bad becomes worse. This is why he chose a scrawny kid from Brooklyn with a heart full of courage over a platoon of perfect soldiers." She crouched down, her piercing eyes softening just a fraction as she looked at Izuku. The strong man who has known power all his life may lose respect for that power, but a weak man knows the value of strength, and knows compassion. She stood and turned to face the general directly. Her voice rang with absolute conviction. "We are not looking for the perfect soldier, General. We have plenty of those. We are looking for a good man. Because a good man will always choose to protect others, even at the cost of himself." She gestured to Izuku, who was now slowly getting to his feet, still shaking. "That is not something you can train. It is not a quirk you can inherit. It is a choice. In the one moment that mattered most, when faced with certain death, only one of you chose to move toward the danger, not to destroy it, but to shield others from it." All Might stepped forward, his skeletal frame seeming to possess a sudden, immense gravity. The doubt that had lingered in his eyes was gone, replaced by a look of profound awe and certainty. He saw it now, clear as day. The same spirit. The same impossible, illogical, beautiful fire that had defined his mentor, Nana Shimura, and Steve Rogers himself. The willingness to be the shield. Bakugo finally found his voice. It was a strangled, furious whisper. You chose him?" He pointed a trembling finger at Izuku. "That's your test? A fake bomb? You picked a quirkless, useless, a Deku, over me?" Dr. Eris Thorne looked past Bakugo as if he were nothing more than a piece of furniture. Her gaze settled on Izuku Midoriya, the trembling boy who had just proven he had the heart of a giant. "General Cole," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument, "I have my candidate." She extended a hand to Izuku. Mr. Midoriya. Welcome to Project Rebirth. The aftermath of the decision was a storm. Bakugo's rage was a palpable force, a hurricane of fury contained within the sterile white walls of the staging area. His protests were not just words. They were explosions of sound and wounded pride, a torrent of invectives aimed at Izuku, at Dr. Thorne, at the very concept of a world that would choose a pebble over a mountain. You're making a mistake. A fatal mistake. He roared, his palms crackling with barely restrained power. When the real villains come, you're going to want my firepower, not his willingness to be a speed bump. He's not a hero. He's just a martyr in training. General Cole, his face a thunderous mask of disbelief, clearly agreed with Bakugo's sentiment, though his dissent was voiced in the clipped, cold tones of military protocol. He argued with Dr. Thorne in a heated, hushed exchange, gesturing furiously toward Bakugo, then toward the trembling, shell-shocked Izuku. But Dr. Thorne was an immovable object. Her logic was a fortress, and her decision was final. Izuku heard none of it. The world had narrowed to a buzzing tunnel of sound. He was floating, disconnected from his own body. He felt the weight of every eye in the room on him, a physical pressure of scorn, disbelief, and Bakugo's pure, undiluted hatred. Me? They chose me? The thought was an illogical, impossible refrain. It felt like a dream, one from which he was terrified to wake. It was All Might, Mr. Yagi, who anchored him. The skeletal man walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. The touch was firm, grounding. Come, my boy, he said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the chaos. Your journey is just beginning. He led Izuku away from the storm, down a pristine white corridor and into an elevator that descended deep into the earth. The doors opened into a section of the facility that was less military base and more advanced medical laboratory. The air was sterile, filled with the low hum of powerful machinery. In the center of the main chamber was a sleek, pod-like apparatus, surrounded by an array of monitors and humming diagnostic equipment. It looked like something out of a science fiction film. This was the Vitaray chamber, the modern evolution of Dr. Erskine's original design. Dr. Thorne was already there, her demeanor shifting from commanding officer to meticulous scientist. Mr. Midoriya, she began, her tone all business. What you are about to undergo will rewrite your body on a cellular level. The serum is a complex string of viral-based mutagens and engineered proteins. The Vitarays will act as the catalyst, forcing your cells to accept and integrate the formula, unlocking your body's absolute maximum potential. She gestured to the pod. It will be intensely painful. Your body will be fighting the process every step of the way. Your metabolism will skyrocket. Your muscle fibers will tear and rebuild themselves thousands of times per second. Your skeletal structure will increase in density. We will be monitoring your vitals, but the success of this procedure ultimately depends on your willpower. You must not fight it. You must accept the change. Izuku stared at the chamber, a cold knot of fear tightening in his stomach. This was it. The moment of truth. He took a deep, shaky breath and looked at Mr. Yagi. The man's gaunt face was serious, but his eyes held an unwavering belief that bolstered Izuku's frayed nerves. I understand, Izuku said, his voice barely a whisper. He stripped down to a pair of medical shorts and lay down on the cool surface of the pod. Technicians moved with quiet efficiency, attaching a web of sensors to his chest, his temples, his arms. As the clear canopy of the pod began to lower, sealing him inside, he saw Mr. Yagi's face through the transparent material. The man gave him a slow, deliberate nod. You can do this. Then, the world dissolved into light and pain. It started as a low thrum that vibrated through his bones, a feeling of being filled with static electricity. Then the Vita rays hit him. A brilliant, golden light flooded the pod, and with it came agony. It was not a specific pain, not a cut or a burn, but an all-encompassing, systemic torment. He felt like he was being simultaneously torn apart and crushed together. Every nerve ending screamed. He could feel his muscles seizing, twisting, and elongating. He heard a sound and distantly realized it was his own raw, ragged scream. His vitals on the main monitor went haywire. Alarms blared. His heart rate is hitting 250. Blood pressure is critical. A technician shouted. He's rejecting the serum. Another called out. Abort! General, we need to abort the procedure. Dr. Thorne's face was a mask of intense concentration. No! Hold the course. His cellular structure is stabilizing, but his body is panicking. He has to push through. Inside the pod, Izuku was drowning. The pain was a red tide, pulling him under. His vision was a kaleidoscope of fractured light. He wanted to give up. He wanted it to stop. I can't do this. I'm not strong enough. Then, through the cacophony of his own screaming nerves, a voice cut through. It wasn't in the room. It was inside his head, a memory, a mantra. It was the voice of All Might from an old interview he'd watched 1,000 times. A hero can always break out of a tough spot. He saw his mother's worried face. He saw the little girl waving at him from the plaza. He saw Mr. Yagi's encouraging nod. He wasn't just doing this for himself. He was doing this for them, for the chance to be the hero they believed he could be. I will not fail. With a surge of will he didn't know he possessed, he stopped fighting the pain. He opened himself to it, embraced it. He channeled all his focus, all his determination, not on surviving the agony, but on accepting the change it heralded. The alarms on the monitor stopped blaring. His vital signs, though still impossibly high, began to stabilize into a steady, rhythmic pattern. My God, a technician whispered, staring at the biofeedback screen. His metabolic rate is 1,000 times normal, but his body, it's adapting. He's consciously controlling his autonomic response. Dr. Thorne allowed a small, triumphant smile. The heart of a hero, she murmured. It's stronger than any muscle. The process seemed to last an eternity and a single, searing second. The golden light faded. The hum of the machine spooled down. The canopy of the pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of cool vapor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a hand gripped the edge of the pod. Izuku Midoriya sat up. The change was breathtaking. He was no longer the frail, scrawny boy who had entered the chamber. His shoulders were broader, his chest deeper. The vague softness of his frame had been replaced by lean, sharply defined musculature, every muscle and tendon etched under his skin like a classical statue. He wasn't bulky or overdeveloped. He was perfect. The peak of human form, radiating an aura of contained power. He blinked, his eyes adjusting to the light. The world seemed sharper, brighter. The low hum of the facility's power converters, once background noise, was now a distinct, multi-layered sound. He could smell the faintest trace of antiseptic from the far side of the room. He looked down at his own hands. They were his, but different. Stronger. More capable. He swung his legs over the side of the pod and stood up. His balance was off, his newfound height, a full 4 inches taller, and muscle mass making him feel clumsy, like a fawn on its first legs. He took a tentative step and nearly stumbled, his body moving with a speed and power his brain hadn't yet calibrated for. Mr. Yagi stepped forward, a blanket in his hands. He wrapped it around Izuku's shoulders, and his smile was wider and more genuine than Izuku had ever seen it. Welcome back, young Midoriya, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Izuku looked at him, truly looked at him, and his enhanced senses picked up things he never noticed before. The faint, almost invisible scar peeking from the man's collarbone, the subtle wheeze in his breathing, the weariness in his eyes that no amount of smiling could fully conceal. He saw not just a skeletal man, but a warrior who had suffered a grievous wound. Mr. Yagi, Izuku said, his own voice deeper, more resonant. You're All Might, aren't you? The question hung in the air. The technicians froze. Dr. Thorne's expression became guarded. All Might's smile didn't falter. He simply sighed, a puff of air that seemed to carry years of weight with it. I suppose there was no hiding it from you now, he said quietly. Then, in a startling transformation, he drew himself up. For a brief second, steam billowed from his body, and his form swelled, the iconic, muscular shape of the symbol of peace flickering into existence before deflating back to his skeletal state with a pained cough. Yes, my boy. I am. Or rather, I was. The confirmation sent another jolt through Izuku, one that had nothing to do with Vitorays. His idol. his hero. Standing right here. The pieces clicked into place. The connection to the project, the profound understanding of heroism, the immense presence hidden in a frail form. Dr. Thorne cleared her throat, bringing them back to the present. Your physical transformation is complete, but this is merely the foundation. Now the real work begins. The first thing they gave him was not a uniform, but a weapon. He was brought to an underground armory, a vault filled with advanced tactical gear and prototyped weaponry. In the center of the room, resting on a velvet-lined pedestal under a single spotlight, was the shield. It was a perfect circle, 30 inches in diameter, gleaming with a soft, metallic luster. The iconic design was there, the red and silver rings, the deep blue center, the brilliant white star, but the finish was different from the original. It was less a painted object and more an intrinsic property of the metal itself. Vibranium adamantium protoalloy, Dr. Thorne explained, her voice filled with professional pride. A modern recreation of the unique, unrepeatable accident that forged the original. Sourced from a vibranium meteorite that landed in the Wakandan outreach zone and bonded with a synthesized protoadamantium matrix. It is, for all intents and purposes, completely indestructible. It absorbs nearly all kinetic energy, making it the perfect defensive tool. Izuku reached out a hand, his fingers hesitating just above the cool surface. He had sketched this shield 100 times, analyzed its properties, dreamed of its potential. Now it was real. He lifted it from the pedestal. He was expecting it to be heavy, but it was surprisingly light, perfectly balanced. On the back were 2 adjustable straps. He slipped his arm through them, his enhanced strength making the motion effortless. It felt right. Like a missing part of himself had just been returned. It is not just a shield, All Might said, his voice taking on the tone of a mentor. It is a symbol. A message. It says that we are here not to attack, but to protect. It is also an incredibly versatile weapon, but only in the right hands. The hands of someone who doesn't see it as a blunt object, but as an extension of their will. His first training session with the shield was a humbling disaster. He was taken to a specialized training room with automated launchers that fired rubber projectiles at him. His first instinct was to just hunker down behind the shield, letting the projectiles thud uselessly against its surface. Defense is only half the equation, young Midoriya. All Might's voice boomed from a speaker. You are not a wall. You are a guardian. Intercept. Redirect. Control the battlefield, Izuku tried. He attempted to angle the shield to deflect the shots, but his calculations were off. A projectile would ricochet at a wild angle, slamming into a wall. Another would bounce off the floor and hit him in the shin. He felt like he was trying to play tennis with a dinner plate. Frustration began to build. He had this incredible body, this perfect weapon, and he couldn't even manage a simple deflection. He remembered Bakugo's effortless power, his own humiliating failures in the initial trials. Was he still that useless Deku, just in a stronger package? Stop! All Might's voice commanded. The launchers went silent. Stop thinking like a student taking a test. Stop trying to find the right answer. You have the greatest analytical mind I have ever seen. Use it. Feel it. See the angles before they happen. Izuku closed his eyes, his new senses kicking in. He could hear the faint whir of the launcher's loading mechanisms. He could feel the subtle shifts in air pressure as the firing chambers prepared. He remembered his notebooks, the pages filled with diagrams and equations. Ricochet angle is a function of impact angle and surface material. Kinetic energy transfer is mitigated by the vibranium weave. Again, he said, his voice steady. The launchers fired. This time, Izuku didn't just see the projectile. He saw its path, a shimmering line in the air. He saw the point of impact on his shield, and he saw the resultant trajectory as a geometric certainty. He shifted his wrist by a mere 2 degrees. Thwack was ping. The rubber projectile hit his shield, ricocheted perfectly, and struck a target on the far wall dead center. A grin, the first genuine, confident grin of his new life, spread across Izuku's face. The launchers unleashed a volley. Izuku moved, a fluid dance of motion and calculation. His body, now perfectly in sync with his mind, responded instantly. He spun, deflecting one shot into another, causing them to cancel each other out in midair. He dropped to one knee, angling the shield to send a projectile ricocheting off the floor, then the ceiling, before it hit a target behind him without him even needing to look. He threw the shield. The motion was instinctive, a perfect blend of his analytical mind and his body's raw power. It spun through the air, a disk of red, white, and blue, striking 3 separate targets with bone-jarring thuds before rebounding off the far wall and flying straight back into his waiting hand with a satisfying thump. In the observation room, All Might watched, a tear tracing a path down his gaunt cheek. It was happening. The boy was becoming the hero. The training montage that followed was a grueling, transformative crucible. His life became a cycle of learning, applying, and mastering combat. His days began before dawn in a state-of-the-art dojo. He was not trained by one master, but by many. A stern ex-Mossad agent taught him Krav Maga, focusing on brutal efficiency and disabling opponents quickly. A graceful Aikido master taught him how to use an opponent's momentum against them, a skill perfectly suited to his shield work. He learned boxing for footwork and head movement, Muay Thai for powerful kicks and knee strikes, and gymnastics for agility and spatial awareness. His body was a sponge, his mind a supercomputer. He didn't just learn the moves. He understood the biomechanics, the physics, the philosophy behind each discipline. He would spar for hours, his body quickly becoming covered in bruises that would fade by morning thanks to his accelerated healing strategy and history. His afternoons were spent with All Might, not in a dojo, but in a library filled with historical texts and mission reports. All Might didn't just teach him how to fight, he taught him why he would have to fight. He made Izuku study the great military strategists, Sun Tzu, Napoleon, Alexander the Great. But he also made him study the great humanitarians and leaders, Lincoln, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. He drilled Izuku on the history of the Hero Age, the rise of the HPSC, the political ramifications of quirk usage, and most importantly, the life and philosophy of Steve Rogers. Steve won the war, my boy, but he won the peace by being a symbol of something better, All Might explained, gesturing to an old photograph of Captain America sharing rations with freed concentration camp survivors. Power can win battles, but only hope can win hearts. That is the burden and the privilege of the shield. You must be a soldier, a strategist, a politician, and a priest all at once. Mastery of self. His evenings were spent in meditation with Dr. Thorne. She taught him to control his enhanced senses, to filter the overwhelming flood of information so he wouldn't be paralyzed by it. She taught him to control his emotions, to find a calm center in the storm of battle. He learned to slow his heart rate, to think with perfect clarity under immense pressure. He was being forged, not just into a weapon, but into a complete hero. The change in him was profound. The stutter was gone, replaced by a quiet, confident cadence. The nervous energy was still there, but it was now channeled into a hyper-awareness of his surroundings. The hunched shoulders were gone, replaced by the straight-backed posture of a soldier. He was still Izuku Midoriya, kind, compassionate, and a little bit nerdy, but now that core was encased in a shell of unbreakable confidence and capability. He was becoming the star-spangled man with a plan. And finally, the day came when he was ready. He stood in the armory once more, but this time, he wasn't just there for the shield. Hanging in a display case was his uniform. It was a masterpiece of tactical design, a clear evolution of the classic suit. Made of a lightweight, bullet-resistant Nomex/Kevlar weave, its base color was a deep, navy blue. Subtly integrated body armor protected his torso and joints. The iconic red and white stripes were present, but as streamlined accents on his abdomen. The white star was emblazoned on his chest. The familiar cowl was now a sleek, functional helmet with a built-in comm system and a heads-up display. It was a modern soldier's uniform, but it was unmistakably, iconically, Captain America. He suited up. The fit was perfect. He slid the shield onto his arm, the magnetic clamps locking it into place with a solid kerchunk. He looked at his reflection in the polished steel of the armory wall. The boy was gone. In his place stood a hero. All Might and Dr. Thorne stood at the entrance. The world is watching, young Midoriya, All Might said, his voice heavy with the weight of the moment. They are scared. They are divided. They need someone to show them the way. Dr. Thorne nodded. Your first mission is a simple one. Public relations. An official unveiling at the iExpo Global Hero Symposium. Let the world see their new symbol. Izuku took a deep breath, the filtered air of his helmet hissing softly. He was nervous, a familiar flutter in his stomach. But this time, it wasn't the nervousness of fear, it was the nervousness of anticipation. The thrumming energy of a racehorse at the starting gate. He was ready. He walked out of the armory and into the light, a star-spangled man ready to meet his destiny. The air on Island was electric. It was a manufactured, perfectly controlled climate, but the energy crackling through the crowd had nothing to do with the weather systems. It was the pure, unadulterated hum of anticipation. The iExpo Global Hero Symposium was the nexus of the hero world, a place where innovation, power, and celebrity collided. Titans of industry shook hands with top-ranked pro-heroes, while reporters from every major news network vied for position, their cameras aimed like sniper rifles at the main stage. Backstage, in a pressurized, sterile white room, Izuku Midoriya felt none of that excitement. He only felt the crushing weight of a billion expectations and the suffocating confines of his helmet. He could hear the thumping of his own heart, a frantic, hammering rhythm that even his enhanced physiology couldn't quell. It felt louder than the muffled roar of the crowd outside. Breathe in. 4 seconds. Hold. 7 seconds. Breathe out. 8 seconds. Dr. Thorne's calming techniques, drilled into him for weeks, were a flimsy raft in a hurricane of anxiety. He looked at his reflection in a polished chrome panel. The man staring back was a stranger. He was tall, confident, and powerful. His uniform was a masterpiece of tactical artistry, the star on his chest a bold declaration. He was Captain America, but underneath it all, Izuku was still there. The quirkless, hero-obsessed boy who used to mutter analyses under his breath. The kid who got shoved around by Kaken. The uniform felt like a costume, the muscles felt borrowed, the shield on his arm felt like a priceless artifact he was about to drop. Imposter. The word echoed in the silent chambers of his mind. You're a fake. A lab rat in a fancy suit. They're all going to see right through you. The door hissed open, and All Might stepped inside, looking even more skeletal than usual under the harsh fluorescent lights. He wasn't smiling. His face was etched with a deep, solemn gravity. Nervous, my boy? He asked, his voice a low rumble. Izuku swallowed, the sound unnaturally loud in his helmet. I feel like I'm about to take a final exam I didn't study for. All Might placed a hand on his armored shoulder. I felt the same way before my debut. I stood behind a curtain, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. I thought, how can I possibly live up to the legacy of my master? How can I be the symbol they need? Izuku looked at him, his own fears mirrored in the story of his idol. What did you do? I remembered what she told me, All Might said, his eyes distant for a moment. She said, Tashinori, you don't have to be me. You just have to be a man who smiles, to show them that even in the darkest times there is hope. You, young Midoriya, you are not Steve Rogers. You are not me. You are Izuku Midoriya. You are the boy who dove on a grenade he thought was real. That is who they need to see. Not the serum, not the shield. They need to see your heart. He squeezed Izuku's shoulder. Go on now. Show them what a good man looks like. With that, All Might stepped back, and the rear wall of the room slid away, revealing the blinding glare of the stage lights and a wall of sound that hit Izuku like a physical blow. On stage, General Cole stood at a podium, his voice booming across the pavilion. A symbol not of one nation's might, but of global unity. A shield to protect us all. President Tsutsumi of the HPSC stepped forward. Today, Project Rebirth comes to fruition. It is with immense pride that we introduce to you a new hero for a new age. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain America. That was his cue. Izuku forced his legs to move, one foot in front of the other, walking out of the darkness and into the roaring, all-consuming light. The reaction was instantaneous. A wave of awe washed over the crowd. Thousands of phones went up, their flashes turning the audience into a galaxy of tiny, strobing stars. He was an impressive sight. The suit, the shield, the sheer physical presence. it was the legend made real. On the massive screens flanking the stage, his image was broadcast, stoic and powerful. He took his position center stage, the training kicking in. Feet shoulder-width apart, shield held ready, head high. He felt like a statue, a prop in his own life story. The questions began immediately, a chaotic chorus from the press pit. Captain? Is it true you were chosen by a joint US-Japan commission? What is your quirk? It must be some kind of enhancement type. Are you related to Steve Rogers? You have the same presence. President Tsutsumi raised a hand for silence. Captain America will answer your questions in due time. But first, allow me to address a key aspect of his selection, one that speaks to the very heart of this project. She paused, letting the tension build. Our new Captain America, the man chosen to be the ultimate symbol of human potential, is quirkless. If her first announcement had been a bombshell, this was a tactical nuke. A stunned, deadening silence fell over the entire iExpo. For a full 3 seconds, the only sound was the wind whistling through the high-tech architecture. Then, the silence shattered into a million pieces of disbelief and outrage. Quirkless? A quirkless Captain America? Is this a joke? You're giving that shield to a Deku? Why not a top pro hero? Why not Endeavor? Mirko? Hawks? The headlines on the news tickers scrolling on the giant screens shifted in real time. Project Rebirth shocking reveal. The quirkless captain, brave or foolish? HPSC gambles world safety on unpowered team. Izuku felt a cold dread wash over him. His deepest fear, realized on a global stage. They saw him. They saw the fraud. His hands, hidden by his gloves, began to tremble. He could feel the weight of their doubt, their scorn. Bakugo's jeering face flashed in his mind. See? They know you're useless. He wanted to run. He wanted to disappear. But then he felt the weight of the shield on his arm, and he heard All Might's words echo in his ears. Show them your heart. Before he could spiral further, chaos erupted. But it wasn't from the crowd. It started with a sound. A high-frequency screech that bypassed the ears and drilled directly into the skull. It was disorienting, nauseating. The crowd cried out, clutching their heads. Glass panels high in the pavilion roof vibrated and then shattered, raining down glittering shards. From the chaos, 3 figures emerged, leaping down from the scaffolding. They wore nondescript black gear, but their faces were twisted in manic glee. Well, 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 the one in the center cackled, a lanky man with wild eyes. A big party, and we weren't invited. Let's liven things up. He flicked his wrist, and a piece of fallen debris, a sharp shard of metal, suddenly glowed with a sickly green light. He flicked it again, and it shot off, not in a straight line, but ricocheting off a pillar, then the floor, then straight towards a group of panicking reporters. This is real. The thought cut through Izuku's fear like a lightning bolt. This wasn't a simulation. These weren't rubber projectiles. Those were real people. His body moved before his mind had a chance to doubt. All the training, all the pain, all the hours of grueling repetition converged into a single, fluid instant. He launched himself forward, a blur of red, white, and blue. He covered the 50 feet in a heartbeat, planting himself in front of the reporters and raising his shield. Clang! The metal shard, buzzing with kinetic energy, slammed into the shield. The impact jarred his arm, a testament to the villain's power, but the vibranium did its work. It absorbed the force completely, the shard falling to the ground, inert and harmless. The other 2 villains sprang into action. One, a hulking brute of a man, roared as his arms swelled and hardened, turning into massive, gray hammers of dense rock. Sledge arms smash, he bellowed, bringing his fists down on the stage's primary support column. The structure groaned, cracking under the immense force. The third villain, a woman with a metallic voice box modulator strapped to her throat, took a deep breath and unleashed another sonic scream. This one was focused, a concussive blast of sound aimed at destabilizing the overhead lighting rig, a multi-ton piece of equipment hanging directly over a section of the crowd. Izuku's mind, once frozen in panic, was now a whirlwind of tactical clarity. The training had created new pathways in his brain. He didn't have to think. He just knew. Assess. Prioritize. Act. All Might's voice, calm and commanding in his memory. Assessment, 3 hostiles. Rebound, projectile manipulation, high unpredictability. Sledge arms, brute force, structural threat. Screech, sonic attacks, crowd control, area denial. Primary threat, collapsing infrastructure and mass panic. Prioritization, civilians. Evacuation. Mitigate structural damage. Neutralize hostiles. In that order. Action. General Cole. President Tsutsumi. Evacuate the stage. Izuku's voice, amplified by his helmet, boomed with an authority that surprised even himself. He didn't wait for a reply. He threw his shield. It wasn't aimed at a villain. It spun through the air with a humming sound and wedged itself perfectly into the cracks sledge arms had made in the support column, the indestructible metal preventing the pillar from collapsing completely. Now unarmed, he sprinted towards the panicking crowd. Everyone stay calm. Move towards the west exits. Orderly. Do not push. Screech unleashed another blast, this one aimed directly at him. He planted his feet, crossed his armored forearms, and leaned into it. The sonic wave hit him like a physical wall, pushing him back several feet, his boots gouging tracks in the polished floor. But his super soldier physique held. The sound was deafening, but Dr. Thorne's mental conditioning allowed him to compartmentalize the pain, to function through it. He saw the lighting rig above begin to sway ominously. It was going to fall. The security forces were overwhelmed, trying to handle the stampede. It was then he saw her. Amid the chaos, a girl in an eye-expo staff uniform was moving with a strange, determined grace. She had short brown hair and a round, expressive face that was currently a mask of concentration. She was tapping pieces of falling debris, her fingertips glowing with a soft pink light. The heavy chunks of concrete and steel would suddenly stop, floating harmlessly in midair as if they were balloons. Quirk, zero gravity. His analytical mind supplied the information instantly. User can nullify the gravity of any object she touches. Weight limit unknown. Duration unknown. Incredibly useful for rescue and damage control. The lighting rig gave a final, terrible groan and snapped from its moorings. It began to plummet towards a group of people pinned against a barricade. You! Zero-G girl! Izuku yelled, pointing. The girl's head snapped up, her wide brown eyes locking with his helmet's visor. The rig! Can you get to it? She didn't hesitate. She scrambled over a pile of rubble, her movements agile. My name is Achiko Uraraka. And yes, I can try. Go! As Uraraka raced towards the falling rig, Izuku turned his attention back to the immediate threats. Sledge arms, enraged that his rampage had been halted, charged at him, his hammer fists ready to pulverize. Without his shield, Izuku was at a disadvantage. But he wasn't defenseless. He remembered his training. The Krav Maga for efficiency. The boxing for footwork. He dodged the first crushing blow, the fist shattering the floor where he'd been standing. He weaved under the second, his movements fluid and precise. He was a dancer, and the brute was a lumbering bear. Using the villain's momentum, Izuku got in close, driving the heel of his palm up under the man's chin in a sharp, stunning blow. As Sledge Arm staggered back, Izuku delivered a powerful roundhouse kick to the man's knee joint. The sickening crunch echoed in the pavilion. The brute roared in pain and collapsed, his quirk deactivating as his concentration broke. One down. He saw Uraraka reach the falling rig. She leaped, her fingers just grazing the metal framework. The massive structure, tons of steel and glass, suddenly stopped its descent, hovering a mere 10 feet above the terrified crowd. A wave of relief washed over them as they scrambled out from under it. Uraraka landed, her face pale with strain. It's heavy, she gasped, her hands pressed together. Can't hold it for long. Meanwhile, Rebound cackled, now launching a volley of debris, shattered chairs, chunks of stage, at the floating rig. Let's see you catch all of this, hero. I need my shield back. Izuku yelled into his comms, not knowing if anyone was listening. A voice, calm and familiar, answered in his ear. On it, Captain. Look alive. From a side entrance, a small, disc-shaped drone zipped into the pavilion. It flew straight to the damaged pillar, magnetically clamped onto the shield, and pulled it free. The pillar groaned but held. The drone banked sharply and flew towards Izuku, releasing the shield in a perfect, arcing toss. Izuku leaped into the air, caught his shield, and landed in a crouch, the metal humming in his grasp. He didn't waste a second. He saw Rebound's projectiles hurtling toward the strained Uraraka and the rig she was holding. He planted his feet, calculated the angles in a nanosecond, and began to move. He became a human bastion. He angled the shield, deflecting one projectile into the wall. He spun, blocking another with the flat of the shield. He dropped, letting a third fly over his head, only to use the shield to bat a fourth out of the air, sending it careening back towards Rebound. It was a masterclass in defensive combat, a perfect fusion of geometry and grace. The crowd, now at a safe distance, watched in stunned silence. The skeptical reporters, the critical heroes, the doubtful public, they were all witnessing it. This wasn't the clumsy, terrified boy from the announcement. This was a protector. A guardian. Screech, having recovered, targeted him again. But this time, Izuku was ready. As she opened her mouth to scream, he hurled the shield. It wasn't aimed at her. It flew past her head and shattered a massive, curved glass marketing display behind her. The sound of 1,000 pounds of glass imploding, amplified by the pavilion's acoustics, created a chaotic feedback loop with her own sonic frequency. She shrieked in pain, her modulator sparking as her quirk overloaded, and crumpled to the ground. 2 down. Only Rebound remained. The villain, seeing his partners defeated, grew desperate. He grabbed a heavy equipment crate, marked it with his quirk, and hurled it not at Izuku, but at the weakened pillar his shield had been supporting. If I can have the glory, no one gets out alive. The crate bounced off the wall, then the ceiling, gathering a terrifying, unpredictable momentum. It was on a collision course with the pillar. If it hit, the entire section of the roof would come down. Izuku saw the trajectory. He saw the impact point. There was no time to get there. But he can. Uraraka! He yelled. Release the rig. Drop it on my mark. Her eyes widened in understanding and trust. Ready, now, she released her quirk. The multi-ton lighting rig plummeted. At the exact same moment, Izuku threw his shield. He didn't throw it at Rebound. He threw it at the floor directly beneath the falling rig. Clang! The shield hit the polished marble. The rig crashed down onto it a millisecond later. The result was a spectacular display of physics. The full, immense force of the falling rig was absorbed by the vibranium and redirected downwards and outwards. The shield was driven into the floor like a nail, but the kinetic blast it unleashed was phenomenal. A shockwave erupted, a visible distortion in the air. It hit Rebound like an invisible freight train, sending him flying backwards, his quirk sputtering out as he was knocked unconscious. It also hit the ricocheting crate, knocking it off course and sending it skittering harmlessly into a pile of rubble. 3 down. The pavilion fell silent. The dust began to settle. The only sounds were the distant sirens, the groaning of stressed metal, and the heavy breathing of 2 young heroes. Izuku stood in the center of the wreckage, his suit singed, his body aching. He walked over to a small child who had fallen during the panic and was crying, separated from her parents. He knelt down, his movements gentle, a stark contrast to the violence he had just displayed. Hey, he said, his voice soft, the helmet's modulator disengaging. It's okay now. You're safe. He helped the little girl to her feet and led her towards the security officers who were now rushing in. The cameras found him. The flashes went off, but this time, they felt different. They weren't the flashes of paparazzi hunting for a story. They were the flashes of history being recorded. The image broadcast to the world was not of a quirkless imposter, but of a hero, bloody but unbowed, protecting the innocent. On the news tickers, the headlines were changing again. A new symbol is born. Captain America saves hundreds at iExpo attack. The heart of a hero, quirkless no more. The crowd, once skeptical, began to applaud. It started with a few people, then grew, swelling into a thunderous, heartfelt ovation. They weren't cheering for the serum, or the shield, or the name. They were cheering for the boy who had run toward the danger. Later, back in the pristine, quiet halls of the Aegis facility, the adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a deep, profound exhaustion. Izuku sat in the debriefing room, out of the suit now, back in his simple training fatigues. The private doubts were still there, whispering in the back of his mind, but they were quieter now. They were overshadowed by the memory of the little girl's relieved face, the sound of the crowd's applause, and the dent on his shield where Rebound's first projectile had struck. All Might, Dr. Thorne, and a grudgingly impressed General Coles sat opposite him. Uraraka stood nervously by the door, having been summoned minutes earlier. Your performance was exceptional, Captain, General Cole admitted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Your tactical awareness and field command under fire were exemplary. All Might was practically beaming, his skeletal form seeming to radiate pride. You didn't just win a fight, my boy. You won their hearts. You showed them that a hero's worth is not in their quirk, but in their courage. Dr. Thorne, ever the pragmatist, brought up a new slide on the main screen. It showed a heat map of the battle, with Izuku's position marked in blue and Uraraka's in pink. Captain America's actions saved every life that was in immediate danger, she stated. However, my analysis shows a 47% probability that without a secondary operative managing collateral damage, at least 14 casualties would have been unavoidable. He cannot be everywhere at once. She turned her gaze to Uraraka, who stiffened. Achiko Uraraka. Top of your class in the HPSC's Rescue and Support Division. Your actions at the iExpo were textbook perfect. You showed initiative, courage, and most importantly, an immediate and seamless synergy with Captain America's field command. She looked from Uraraka to Izuku. A shield is strongest when it has support. We are officially greenlighting the formation of a dedicated response unit, codenamed Task Force Liberty. Its purpose will be to support Captain America in the field. She looked directly at Uraraka. Ms. Uraraka, your performance was your final exam. We would like you to be its first member. Do you accept? Achiko's eyes went wide, her mouth falling open. She looked at the stoic Dr. Thorne, the proud All Might, and then at Izuku. A brilliant, determined smile broke across her face. Yes. Absolutely. It would be an honor. Izuku stood up and walked over to her. He was back to being just a boy, slightly awkward and incredibly earnest. I just wanted to say thank you, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I couldn't have saved those people without you. You were amazing. Achiko blushed, her cheeks turning as pink as the glow of her quirk. You were the amazing one. I've never seen anyone move like that. It was like watching All Might in his prime, but with more angles. A comfortable, easy rapport settled between them, a friendship forged in fire and chaos. Later that night, Izuku was alone in his quarters. The shield rested on a stand by his bed. He ran his fingers over the new scratch on its surface, a small imperfection that made it feel more real, more his. The doubts hadn't vanished. The fear was still there. The weight of the world felt heavier than ever. But now, he knew he wasn't carrying it alone. He had a team, even if it was just one other person. He had proven something to the world, and more importantly to himself. He wasn't an imposter. He was Captain America. And his work was just beginning. The weeks following the iExpo attack settled into a new, demanding rhythm for Izuku. The world now knew his face, or at least the determined line of his jaw visible beneath his helmet. He was no longer a secret. He was a symbol, and a symbol's work was never done. The initial wave of skepticism had been replaced by a groundswell of public adoration, but that adoration came with the crushing weight of expectation. Every news broadcast, every hero forum, every social media feed buzzed with talk of the new Captain America. He was the embodiment of a beautiful, dangerous idea, that heroism was a choice, not a birthright. His days were a blur of intense, focused work. The training didn't stop, it escalated. He and Achiko Uraraka, the first and so far only other member of the newly christened Task Force Liberty, became a seamless unit. Their morning spars were a study in contrasting styles that had melded into a breathtaking synergy. Izuku was the anchor, the strategist, his movements precise and powerful, his shield an extension of his will. Achiko was the force multiplier, a whirlwind of gravitational ingenuity. She would make him weightless, allowing him to launch into aerial attacks that defied physics. He would use his shield to ricochet projectiles for her to catch with her quirk, turning them into floating mines. They developed a nonverbal shorthand, a language of glances and gestures that was faster and more efficient than any comms system. Their friendship deepened with every shared bruise and every post-training meal in the Aegis facility's massive mess hall. Achiko's bright, unwavering optimism was the perfect counterbalance to Izuku's tendency to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. "You're thinking too loud again, Deku," she'd said one afternoon, poking him in the arm as he stared intently at a tactics board. He'd flinched at the old nickname, but she'd quickly corrected herself. "Sorry, I mean, you told me what it meant to you, how you wanted to turn it into something that means you can do it. And you are. So I just thought." He had looked at her earnest, slightly flustered expression, and a real, unforced smile had spread across his face. "No," he said softly. "From you, Uraraka. I think I like it." She had beamed, a smile as bright as the sun, and the weight on his shoulders had felt just a little bit lighter. But beyond the training grounds, a shadow was lengthening. In the sterile, data-drenched environment of the command center, Dr. Thorne and All Might were piecing together a disturbing mosaic. "The pattern is becoming undeniable," Dr. Thorne said one morning, her voice sharp as she addressed Izuku and Achiko. The main holoscreen behind her displayed a map of the world, dotted with glowing red markers. "Over the past 6 months, there have been a series of high-tech thefts and raids, seemingly random, disparate events. But when cross-referenced, they all point to a single, unseen perpetrator." She brought up a series of images. A shattered laboratory at Yaoyorozu Creations. A breached cargo freighter belonging to Stark Industries. A raided medical research facility in Germany. From Yaoyorozu, they stole prototype microreactors designed for city-wide power grid management. From Stark, they took a shipment of advanced signal jammers and cloaking technology. From the German lab, they stole a significant quantity of an experimental quirk-enhancing drug, codenamed Catalyst. Izuku leaned forward, his analytical mind kicking into high gear. "Catalyst? I've read about that. It was deemed too unstable for hero use. It doesn't just boost the quirk, it makes it volatile, unpredictable. It pushes the user's power to its absolute limit, but often at the cost of control and long-term physical damage." "Precisely," All Might affirmed, his expression grim. "It's a weapon, not a medicine. Power without discipline. It's a philosophy I have fought my entire life." "The group responsible is careful," Dr. Thorne continued, her fingers flying across the console. "They leave no witnesses, no forensic evidence. But they have a calling card. An ideology. In each raid, they leave behind this symbol." An image appeared on the screen, a stylized, open palm with a single, glowing eye in its center. "We have intercepted fragmented communications," she said. "They call themselves the New Hand. Their belief is simple and terrifyingly seductive. Power, true power, should not be left to the lucky, those born with powerful quirks. It should be seized by the worthy, those with the will to take it. They see society as a flawed structure that rewards genetic accidents, and they intend to demolish it and build a new one where strength is the only law." Izuku stared at the symbol, a chill running down his spine. It was the antithesis of everything he stood for, everything Steve Rogers and All Might had championed. It was the philosophy of a bully, magnified to a global scale. The villains at the Expo, Achiko pieced together. They were a test run, weren't they? A probe to gauge your strength. And a message, Izuku added, his voice low. They attacked my public debut to show they weren't afraid of the old symbols. They're declaring war on the very idea of what a hero is. And now, Dr. Thorne said, her face hardening, we have our first concrete lead. One of our deep cover assets has confirmed a major transaction. A shipment of catalyst is being moved tonight at the port of Yokohama. It's our best chance to intercept a high-ranking operative and seize a supply of the drug. Task Force Liberty is ready, Izuku said, his voice ringing with newfound confidence. There is a complication, General Cole's voice cut in. He appeared on a secondary screen, his face a mask of stern disapproval. He had never fully accepted Izuku's selection, viewing the Expo incident as a lucky break rather than proof of concept. The HPSC has insisted on assigning one of their own top assets to this mission. They feel your task force is undermanned and unproven. The insult was thinly veiled. This operative is not under your direct command, Captain. He is your partner. He is en route to you now. Before Izuku could process this, the doors to the command center hissed open. The young man who entered was like a living paradox. He was tall and leanly muscled, with an air of quiet, lethal intensity. But it was his appearance that was so jarring. His hair was perfectly divided down the middle, the right side a stark, crimson red, the left a pristine, snowy white. A large, puckered burn scar covered the left side of his face, surrounding a cold, turquoise eye. His right eye was a calm, slate gray. He wore a dark, functional combat suit, devoid of any color or flair, and the air around him seemed to drop a few degrees. Izuku recognized him instantly. Shoto Todoroki. The son of the number 2 hero, Endeavor. A prodigy who had entered the UA hero course on a recommendation, possessing a quirk of unimaginable power. Dr. Thorne stood. Mr. Todoroki, thank you for joining us. This is Captain America and his associate, Ms. Uraraka. Todoroki's heterochromatic gaze swept over them, lingering on Izuku for a moment. There was no curiosity, no respect, no emotion at all. It was the look a scientist might give a lab specimen. I've read the file, Todoroki said, his voice a flat, cold monotone. The mission is to secure the asset and neutralize the hostiles. The plan is simple. He looked at the holographic map of the Yokohama port. We make a hard entry at the designated pier. I will use a wide-area flash freeze to incapacitate all hostiles and secure the perimeter in under 10 seconds. You two will handle cleanup and evidence collection. It will be efficient. Izuku stared at him, taken aback by the sheer arrogance and the utter disregard for collaboration. A flash freeze of that magnitude could compromise the catalyst shipment. The chemical compounds are highly volatile. It could also endanger any dock workers or civilians that our intel might have missed. We need a stealth approach first. Todoroki's gaze was dismissive. A stealth approach is slow. It invites complications. My method is absolute. My method prioritizes lives, Izuku countered, his voice steady but firm. We go in quiet. We confirm the location of the shipment and the number of hostiles. We ensure there are no civilian variables. Then, we execute a coordinated, surgical strike. I am the lead on this mission, Todoroki. We do it my way. A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, danced in Todoroki's turquoise eye. He clearly wasn't used to being given orders, especially not by someone he viewed as an artificially enhanced quirkless boy playing dress-up. Your way is inefficient, he stated flatly. But he didn't argue further. He simply turned away, a clear signal that the conversation was over. Inform me when we are deploying. Achiko moved to Izuku's side, her expression worried. He's intense, she whispered. He's powerful, Izuku corrected, his eyes still on Todoroki's back. And he thinks that's all that matters. A grim understanding settled over him. This mission wouldn't just be a fight against the new hand. It would be a battle of ideals, waged right here, within his own team. The port of Yokohama at night was a mechanical ghost town. Towering cranes stood like skeletal sentinels against the bruised purple sky. The endless labyrinth of shipping containers formed canyons of steel and shadow. The air was thick with the smell of salt, diesel, and rust. High atop a crane, 3 figures lay prone, observing the pier below. There, Izuku whispered into his comm, his helmet's optical zoom focused on a supposedly abandoned warehouse at the end of Pier 7. Heat signatures inside. At least a dozen. They're using a container crane to load crates onto a high-speed smuggling boat. See? I could have frozen the entire pier by now. Todoroki's voice clipped back in his ear, devoid of any subtlety. He lay a few feet away, a faint mist rising from his left side as he impatiently cooled the metal beneath him. And you'd have frozen the evidence and potentially triggered a massive chemical explosion, Izuku retorted calmly. He turned to Achiko. Uraraka status? I'm in position, her cheerful voice replied. She was perched on a different crane, her specialized goggles scanning the area. The crates matched the specs for hazardous material transport, and I've got eyes on the boat's engine. It's not standard. Looks like a modified Stark hydrofoil. They plan on being long gone before any official response arrives. Okay, team. Here's the plan, Izuku said, his mind mapping out the battlefield. This is a pincer movement. Uraraka, you're our eye in the sky and vertical support. On my signal, you'll target the smugglers on the boat first. Disorient them. Todoroki, you and I will make our approach from opposite sides of the warehouse. Your objective is containment. Use your ice to block their escape routes. Funnel them towards me. I'll handle the close quarters takedowns. We prioritize capturing the leader, but the safety of the shipment comes first. Minimal destructive force. Are we clear? Clear! Achiko chirped. A moment of silence, then a clipped, "Fine," from Todoroki. Execute, Izuku commanded. What followed was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Achiko was a ghost. She used her quirk on a loose coil of thick rope, making it weightless, then swung down from her perch, landing silently on the deck of the smuggling boat. She tapped the two guards there on their shoulders. Their eyes widened in shock as their feet lifted from the deck, sending them flailing into the air, completely helpless. Simultaneously, Izuku and Todoroki moved. Izuku was a shadow, darting between shipping containers, his movements silent and fluid. The serum had turned his body into a perfect athletic instrument. Todoroki, however, had no interest in stealth. He strode forward, and the ground frosted over with every step. With a single, sharp gesture, a massive wall of ice erupted from the concrete, blocking the main road off the pier. A second gesture, and the water around the smuggling boat began to freeze solid, trapping it in a makeshift dry dock. It was an awesome, terrifying display of raw power. Todoroki, hold! That's too much! Izuku hissed into his comm. They're contained, was the cold reply. The new hand operatives, alerted by the sudden ice age, burst from the warehouse, armed with advanced energy rifles. We're compromised. Protect the shipment. One of them yelled, clearly the leader. This was where the plan diverged into two clashing symphonies of combat. Todoroki was a blizzard. He unleashed a wave of jagged ice, a glacier that flowed across the pier, forcing the smugglers to scramble for cover. He didn't aim for them. He aimed for the space around them, creating an impassable, treacherous terrain of slick surfaces and sharp angles. It was brutal, efficient, and utterly indiscriminate. He was a force of nature, terraforming the battlefield to his will. Izuku was a scalpel. He exploded from the shadows, shield first. One of the smugglers fired a concentrated energy blast. Izuku didn't just block it. He angled his shield perfectly, and the green bolt ricocheted, striking the rifle out of another smuggler's hands. He moved through the icy landscape Todoroki had created, his enhanced balance allowing him to treat the slick surfaces as his own personal playground. He flowed between enemies, a whirlwind of precision strikes. A shield bash to a chest to knock the wind out of one opponent. A sweeping leg kick to take another off his feet. He used the environment, kicking off a container to launch himself over a burst of gunfire, his movements economical and purposeful. He was disabling, not destroying. Uraraka, give me a lift! He yelled. You got it, Captain! From above, Achiko tapped a large, empty shipping container. It lost its weight, and with a gentle push, she sent the multi-ton box floating slowly towards a group of entrenched smugglers. They stared in dumbfounded terror as a building-sized object drifted towards them, blocking their line of sight and forcing them out of cover. The synergy between Izuku and Achiko was perfect. But Todoroki was a rogue element, a variable Izuku couldn't fully control. Target the catalyst! The new hand leader screamed in desperation. If we can't have it, no one will. Two of the smugglers turned their energy rifles on the crate being loaded onto the boat. Todoroki, no! Izuku shouted. But Todoroki was already moving. He saw the direct threat and chose the most direct solution. He stomped his right foot, and a sheet of roaring flame erupted from his left side, a stark contrast to the ice. The wave of fire washed over the two smugglers, instantly neutralizing them. But the intense heat also flash vaporized some of the ice near the boat, and worse, it licked the side of the hazardous material crate. Alarms blared from the crate. A red light began to flash frantically. Thermal runaway! The catalyst is destabilizing! Achiko yelled from her perch. It's gonna blow! The new hand leader laughed, a wild, maniacal sound. Fools! You've done it for us! He made a break for it, trying to scale the ice wall Todoroki had created. There was no time for blame, no time for "I told you so." Izuku's mind processed the new reality in a fraction of a second. "Todoroki! Containment dome! Now!" he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Cover the crate. Uraraka, get clear!" For the first time, Todoroki followed an order without hesitation. The gravity of the situation was absolute. He thrust both hands forward, and a massive, thick dome of ice instantly formed over the volatile crate, sealing it in a glistening tomb. The structure groaned, cracking under the immense, building pressure from within. "It won't hold for long," Todoroki grunted, his face contorted with effort as he continuously reinforced the ice. Izuku sprinted towards the dome. The new hand leader was halfway up the ice wall. Izuku didn't have time for both. He made a choice. He leaped onto a stack of crates, launched himself into the air, and hurled his shield. It spun like a discus, a perfect throw. It clipped the escaping leader in the back of the head, and the man slid down the ice wall, unconscious. The shield rebounded off the wall, and Izuku caught it as he landed in front of the groaning ice dome. "It's going to rupture!" he yelled. The dome cracked, a spider web of fissures spreading across its surface. A blinding white light began to shine from within. Izuku planted his feet, braced his shield in front of the weakest point of the dome, and leaned into it with every ounce of his super soldier strength. "It's not about stopping it," he grunted through gritted teeth, a lesson from his training flashing in his mind. "It's about directing the blast." The dome shattered. A wave of pure, white-hot energy erupted outwards. It slammed into Izuku's shield. The force was unimaginable, a physical hammer blow that drove him back several feet, his boots carving deep trenches in the concrete pier. The iconic clang of his shield was drowned out by the roar of the explosion. The vibranium glowed cherry red as it absorbed and vented the cataclysmic energy, but it held. It held. When the light faded, the pier was a wreck. The ice dome was gone, replaced by a cloud of steam. The smuggling boat was a twisted, melted wreck. But the rest of the pier was intact. The city beyond was safe. Izuku stood, his entire body trembling from the strain, his shield smoking. Todoroki was on one knee, breathing heavily, the explosive release of his power having taken its toll. The new hand operatives were either unconscious or tangled in Achiko's zero-gravity ropes. The mission was a success. But the victory felt hollow, a hair's breadth from disaster. Back at the Aegis facility, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. The captured new hand members, including the leader, were in holding cells. The salvaged, inert remains of the catalyst were being analyzed in a hazmat lab. Izuku sat in front of the main command console, ignoring the congratulations from Dr. Thorne and the grudging nod of respect from General Cole. His eyes were closed, but he wasn't resting. He was replaying the entire mission in his mind, every move, every decision. Todoroki stood by the far wall, his arms crossed, his expression as cold and distant as ever. The mission was a success, he stated, as if to preempt any criticism. All hostiles were neutralized and the asset was secured. "We almost lost half the port of Yokohama," Izuku said, opening his eyes. They weren't angry, they were tired. "Your fire attack was reckless. It put everyone at risk." "It was efficient," Todoroki countered, his voice flat. "It eliminated a direct threat. Your methods are complicated. You hesitate. You prioritize sentiment over victory. I prioritize lives. That is the victory." Izuku shot back, his voice rising for the first time. "What good is winning if we destroy the city we're trying to protect? What's the point of this shield if it's not protecting people? The point of power is to use it to eliminate threats," Todoroki said, his gaze turning icy. "Anything else is a weakness. My father taught me that." The mention of endeavor hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Before Izuku could respond, Achiko set a steaming mug of coffee on the console beside him. "You were brilliant, Deku," she said softly, ignoring Todoroki completely. "You held it all together." He gave her a weak, grateful smile. But his mind was already elsewhere. The victory felt wrong. The new hand leader had been too willing to destroy the shipment. It felt less like a failed transaction and more like something else. A distraction? He pulled up the mission files. Not just from tonight, but from every known incident attributed to the new hand. The Yayorosa heist. The Stark theft. The iExpo attack. He cross-referenced locations, dates, and the specific nature of the stolen technology. Achiko watched him, her head tilted. What is it? It doesn't make sense, Izuku murmured, his fingers flying across the holographic interface, pulling up schematics and city maps. They're not stockpiling. Look, he pointed to the screen. Yayorosa's microreactors? They were stolen from a facility adjacent to the main power grid hub for the Kanto region. The Stark jammers? Taken from a cargo ship docked less than a mile from the primary emergency services broadcast tower. The catalyst tonight? That pier is a major shipping lane, but it's also directly over a critical underwater communications cable that links Japan to the mainland. A horrifying picture began to form in his mind, the disparate pieces clicking into place like the tumblers of a lock. They aren't building an arsenal to wage a war, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper as the full implication hit him. They're gathering a specific set of tools. Power grid disruption. Communications blackout. Civil unrest caused by unstable quirk users high on catalyst. Mass transit shutdown. He stood up, his eyes wide with dawning horror. He looked at All Might and Dr. Thorne, who were now watching him intently. It's a pattern, he said, his voice shaking with the terrible weight of his discovery. Every piece of tech, every targeted location, it's all part of a larger plan. They aren't trying to fight heroes. They're planning to surgically dismantle a city's entire infrastructure. They're creating the perfect conditions for total, societal collapse. He zoomed in on the map, on the nexus point where all the targeted infrastructure overlapped. The city of Musudafu. Their home. They're not building an arsenal, he repeated, his voice barely audible. They're building a doomsday clock. And we just saw them put the last piece in place.